The morning of July 28, 1935, changed aviation history forever. At Boeing Field in Seattle, a massive four-engine aircraft rolled down the runway, its 13 machine guns glinting in the sunlight. Seattle Times reporter Richard Williams watched in amazement as this bristling beast lifted into the sky and muttered the words that would become legendary: Flying Fortress. What Williams witnessed was the birth of the most feared bomber of World War II, the Boeing B-17. But this wasn't just another military aircraft. This was America's answer to a question that haunted military strategists. How do you build a bomber that can fight its way deep into enemy territory and bring its crew home alive? The answer lay in the mind of Boeing engineer Edward Wells and his revolutionary design philosophy. While other manufacturers submitted predictable twin-engine designs, Wells envisioned something unprecedented: a four-engine heavy bomber that would operate at crushing altitudes where enemy fighters couldn't reach, and anti-aircraft fire couldn't touch it. The prototype's first flight exceeded every expectation. Flying from Seattle to Wright Field in Ohio, it averaged 252 miles per hour, far beyond the Army's specifications. But triumph turned to tragedy during military evaluation when the prototype crashed due to pilot error. The crew had forgotten to remove the control locks, a simple mistake that nearly killed the entire program. Yet the Army recognized the aircraft's revolutionary potential and ordered 13 pre-production models. This decision would prove crucial as war clouds gathered over Europe, because what emerged from Boeing's factories would become the backbone of Allied victory, the heart of a warrior. Deep inside the B-17's aluminum skin beat four Wright R-1820 Cyclone radial engines, each a masterpiece of engineering precision. These weren't just power plants. They were the life force of a flying battleship, designed to operate where no aircraft had operated before. Each Cyclone displaced 1,823 cubic inches and produced 1,200 horsepower at takeoff. But raw power was only part of the equation. The real engineering triumph was the Supercharger system that compressed incoming air, allowing the engines to maintain performance at 25,000 feet, where air density was only 1/3 of sea level. Without this forced induction technology, the B-17 would have been starved for air in the thin atmosphere where it did its deadly work. The Supercharger allowed the Cyclones to breathe properly at altitudes that turned enemy fighters into wheezing, struggling machines. The result was performance figures that seemed impossible for such a large aircraft. The B-17G could achieve 287 miles per hour at 25,000 feet, with a cruising speed of 182 miles per hour. More importantly, it could climb to its service ceiling of 35,600 feet, high enough to avoid most anti-aircraft fire, but low enough for accurate bombing. Range capabilities were equally impressive. With a full bomb load of 6,000 pounds, the B-17 could fly 2,000 miles deep into Germany from bases in England. On ferry flights without bombs, range extended to 3,750 miles. This performance was enabled by a fuel system carrying 2,780 gallons of aviation gasoline in multiple wing tanks. But the fuel system incorporated a crucial defensive feature that saved countless lives: self-sealing tanks. When punctured by bullets or shell fragments, these tanks would automatically seal around the holes, preventing fuel leaks that could cause catastrophic fires. Combined with carbon dioxide fire suppression systems, this innovation significantly improved crew survivability. Most importantly, the Wright Cyclones were remarkably reliable. Unlike liquid-cooled engines that could be disabled by a single coolant line hit, these air-cooled radials could continue operating even with significant battle damage, bringing countless crews home safely when everything else had failed. Arsenal in the sky. When America entered World War II after Pearl Harbor, the B-17 was ready for a mission that would define modern warfare. The Army Air Forces had learned from early British bombing experiences and committed to a strategy that was both bold and controversial: daylight precision bombing. While the British Royal Air Force bombed German cities at night to avoid heavy losses, American commanders believed they could achieve better results with daylight raids on specific military and industrial targets. The B-17 was perfectly suited for this dangerous mission. The aircraft's reputation as a flying fortress came from its revolutionary defensive armament system. The final B-17G variant bristled with 13 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns, creating interlocking fields of fire that could engage enemy fighters from virtually any angle. This wasn't just firepower. It was a carefully engineered defensive system. Each 50 caliber M2 Browning could fire 750 rounds per minute, launching 700 grain bullets at 2,800 feet per second. These weren't just machine guns. They were aircraft destroyers capable of penetrating enemy fighter armor and causing catastrophic damage. The B-17 typically carried 6,380 rounds of ammunition, giving gunners sustained firepower during lengthy fighter attacks. The defensive arsenal included a Bendix chin turret with 2 guns, a Sperry ball turret underneath with 2 more, a top turret behind the cockpit with 2 guns, and a tail turret with 2 additional weapons. Waist gunners manned flexible guns on each side of the fuselage, while the radio operator controlled a single gun firing upward through the radio room hatch. The psychological effect was as important as the physical damage. German pilots learned to respect the B-17's defensive firepower, often breaking off attacks rather than pressing home their advantage. This defensive reputation was earned through countless air battles over Europe, where Flying Fortress gunners claimed thousands of enemy aircraft destroyed. Forged in fire. What made the B-17 truly legendary wasn't just its ability to deliver bombs, it was its incredible capacity to absorb damage and keep flying. The aircraft's design philosophy centered around bringing crews home alive, even when everything went wrong. Boeing engineers had designed the plane with multiple redundant systems. If one engine failed, 3 others could carry the load. If hydraulic systems were shot out, manual backups existed. If the electrical system failed, the plane could still fly on backup power. The structural design was equally impressive. The B-17's aluminum framework could withstand tremendous punishment while maintaining structural integrity. Wing spars were designed to carry flight loads even when heavily damaged. The fuselage could absorb multiple hits and continue flying. Stories of B-17 survival became the stuff of legend. Aircraft returned to base with wings held on by cables, with huge sections of fuselage blown away, and with crew members performing incredible acts of heroism to save their fellow airmen. One of the most famous survival stories involves the All-American, a B-17 that collided with a German Messerschmitt Bf-109 over Tunisia. The fighter's wing sliced completely through the B-17's fuselage, just behind the ball turret, leaving the tail section connected only by control cables. Incredibly, pilot Ken Bragg managed to fly the severed aircraft back to base and land safely, saving his entire crew. Another legendary survival involved Staff Sergeant Alan McGee, a ball turret gunner whose B-17 was shot down over France. When the aircraft began to break apart, McGee fell 22,000 feet without a parachute and crashed through the glass roof of a French train station. Amazingly, he survived with only broken bones and lived to tell his incredible story. The price of victory. The B-17's combat record is filled with missions that defined the course of World War II, but perhaps none more so than the Schweinfurt-Regensburg mission of August 17, 1943. The target was Germany's ball-bearing production facilities, a crucial component in all military machinery. The mission was a disaster in terms of losses. Of the 376 B-17s that took off that morning, 60 were shot down and 95 were damaged beyond repair. That's a 41% loss rate in a single day, losses that would be unthinkable by modern military standards. But the strategic impact was enormous. German ball-bearing production was crippled for months, significantly hampering their war machine. The mission proved that even heavily defended targets could be reached and destroyed, though at a terrible cost in human lives. The story of the Memphis Belle became another symbol of B-17 courage. Piloted by Robert Morgan, this aircraft became the first B-17 to complete 25 combat missions with its original crew intact. The achievement was so significant that Hollywood made a documentary about it in 1944, turning the crew into celebrities and symbols of American determination. For every famous story, there were thousands of unknown heroes. Staff Sergeant Maynard Smith earned the Medal of Honor during a mission over France when his B-17 was hit by enemy fire and caught fire. Smith fought the flames while manning his machine gun position, threw burning ammunition out of the aircraft, and continued fighting until the plane reached safety. The B-17's combat effectiveness resulted from continuous evolution based on hard-won battlefield experience. Each major variant incorporated lessons learned from previous models, creating an aircraft that improved throughout the war. Early models had blind spots that German fighters exploited, so later versions added the chin turret to cover the forward approach. Innovation under fire. The B-17 pioneered formation flying techniques that maximized defensive firepower. The combat box formation allowed multiple aircraft to support each other with overlapping fields of fire. When German fighters approached, they faced not just one aircraft's guns, but dozens of machine guns firing in coordinated patterns. Communication technology was equally advanced. The B-17 featured multiple radio systems that allowed coordination between aircraft, navigation updates, and emergency communications. The intercom system let crew members communicate despite the deafening noise of 4 engines and wind rushing through gun ports. Perhaps most importantly, the B-17 featured some of the war's most advanced survival equipment. Heated flight suits kept crews warm at extreme altitudes where temperatures could drop to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Oxygen systems allowed operations above 20,000 feet where the air was too thin to breathe. Parachutes, life rafts, and emergency supplies gave crews a fighting chance if they had to bail out over enemy territory. The bomber also featured the revolutionary Norden bomb sight, a top-secret mechanical computer that calculated bombing solutions based on altitude, airspeed, and wind conditions. This device, costing more than a luxury car, allowed bombardiers to place bombs within a 100-foot circle from 25,000 feet, at least in theory. The Norden was so classified that bombardiers swore an oath to destroy it rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Engineering legacy. As World War II progressed, the B-17 gradually gave way to newer, more advanced aircraft. The B-24 Liberator could carry more bombs and had greater range. The B-29 Super Fortress offered pressurized cabins and even heavier payloads. But none of these aircraft captured the public imagination quite like the Flying Fortress. The B-17's influence extended far beyond military aviation. The emphasis on crew safety, redundant systems, and robust design influenced everything from commercial airliners to spacecraft. Modern aircraft still incorporate many of the defensive design principles pioneered by the Flying Fortress. Production of the B-17 ended in 1945, with a total of 12,731 aircraft built by Boeing, Douglas, and Lockheed Vega. Most were scrapped after the war, but a few survived as museum pieces and flying memorials. Today, fewer than 50 B-17s remain in flying condition worldwide, making them incredibly rare and precious links to history. The final mission, the Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, was more than just a bomber. It was a symbol of American ingenuity, courage, and determination. Its ability to bring crews home alive, even under the most extreme circumstances, made it beloved by the men who flew it and respected by the enemies who faced it. The B-17's combat record speaks for itself. Over 640,000 tons of bombs dropped on enemy targets, countless strategic objectives destroyed, and ultimately a significant contribution to Allied victory. But perhaps more importantly, the Flying Fortress proved that American industry could produce weapons that were not just effective, but also protective of the brave men who used them. From its Wright Cyclone engines to its 13 machine guns, every component was designed with a single purpose: to deliver Allied aircrews safely to their targets and bring them home again. The B-17's technical achievements influenced bomber design for generations, establishing principles of defensive armament and structural integrity that continue to this day. The legend of the Flying Fortress lives on in the stories of the men who flew them, the ground crews who maintained them, and the engineers who designed them. It represents a time when American engineering excellence and manufacturing might combine to create weapons that could win wars while preserving the lives of those who wielded them. In an age of precision-guided munitions and stealth technology, the B-17 reminds us that sometimes the best weapon isn't the most advanced. It's the one that brings its crew home alive to fight another day.